What's going on, everybody? You know the drill. It's budget vintage tournament report time, and that is specifically $30 budget vintage. I'm Russell, or Rusty, in Discord. You guys might know me by now. Today is March 12th. It's a Sunday, and we just finished our March 11th Win-A-Buy tournament at Mavericks. This was the first tournament we did at Mavericks. I think it was a huge success. We had 13 people come out, which is really good because we just had the date posted for that tournament like a week prior. So shout out to everyone who came out for that. That was awesome. We do have on March 25th our Win-A-Taiga, which Everett will be walking into with a round one bye because he took down this tournament with Burn. So congratulations to Everett on that one. Hoping to see a big turnout for the March 25th Win-A-Taiga. That's at 1 p.m. It is no proxies allowed, by the way. So if you guys need a hand getting any cards or you need to get something ordered from TCG Player, I suggest starting to work on that now. But yeah, hope you guys can make it out. It'll be $20 entry. There will be pretty big credit payout and also a Taiga to first. So, hope to see you guys there. We're also going to be doing our first spell table tournament online tomorrow. That's Monday the 13th. That'll be 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be, like I said, it'll be over spell table. Color proxies are fine. It'll be my first time really running a tournament or running a tournament on spell table, so I'm going to ask that you bear with me a little bit. But kind of trying to do this one small, just as like a proof of concept. But anyone who's interested in hopping in, I hope that you do. If we get more than 8 people, I'll buy a $30 deck for first place. Send it to your house from TCG Player. That's all I got as far as logistics. So let's talk about this tournament. I played High Tide, and I got second. I went 3-1, losing to Everett in the finals. I'll probably start out with a little bit of a deck tech and a tournament report on how it went for me, and then I'll go into the other decks and talk about especially Everett's Burn deck. So, High Tide. Also, man, I really need to just get Patreon subbed to Moxfield so I don't have ads anymore. And I'll be honest, the reason I haven't is because I have 2 accounts, or actually I have 3 accounts. I've got my personal account, I've got a Budget Vintage Archive account, and I have another Budget Vintage account. I'm not really sure why, and I haven't decided which one gets the ad removal, so I don't know, maybe someone remind me to do that. Anyway, so I played High Tide. I've kind of talked about some of my decisions with High Tide and kind of the differences between some of the lists, but I'll just go over a couple of things that I really that I was curious about and that I was trying to get some data on and figure out. Biggest one is that I'm playing Blue Sun Zenith as my win condition instead of Brain Freeze. It's a cost consideration. Blue Suns is $1.20, Brain Freeze is like $4.40. And I wanted to allocate that money to Mystic Sanctuary and Defense Grids. My budget's actually really low right now. I think some stuff dropped since yesterday. I know I was above $28 or $29 yesterday. I don't think I could fit a second Defense Grid. So I don't know what changed overnight, but whatever. So the couple main points. Blue Sun Zenith is insane. If you're playing High Tide, I would suggest that you use Blue Sun Zenith instead of Brain Freeze. I really don't think Brain Freeze is necessary. There was never a point where I was comboing off where I felt like Brain Freeze would be better. The only time it would be better really is in the face of counterspells. But if your opponent has a counterspell, they're not going to save it. Excuse me. I'm done. Okay. If your opponent has a counterspell on your combo turn, they're not saving it trying to catch the Blue Sun Zenith. They're going to fight you on High Tide or your first untapper, I think, right? Because the way High Tide's combo turns start, it's High Tide and then cast like Frantic Search, usually. Or, maybe like a Cloud of Fairies to get some mana or something. So if you're playing against High Tide and you have a counterspell, I suspect that you either like Spell Pierce or Counterspell targeting High Tide, or if you're trying to get a little bit more out of the High Tide player's hand, you can let High Tide resolve and then fight them on the Frantic Search or the Cloud of Fairies or whatever. So I don't think that Blue Sun Zenith is worse than Brain Freeze in that capacity. Additionally, with Blue Sun Zenith, you're making your opponent draw out their library, so you don't have to be worried about shuffle effects, like shuffle the graveyard in effects, like Elixir of Immortality or, Emrakul, but obviously not in our format, but, stuff like that. You don't have to worry about Wheel of Sun and Moon, etc. You do still have to worry about Hexproof or like Shroud from Solitary Confinement, But what I'm saying is Blue Sun Zenith gets the job done. I don't think it's particularly difficult to make, let's say, 53 mana to kill your opponent with Blue Sun Zenith. I do think you have to be a little bit cognizant of the fact that that's your game plan, because Brain Freeze is such a low mana kill, right? It's 2 mana at the end of your combo, essentially, and it's just going to be leveraging that storm count to get them dead. So you don't actually have to go super mana positive. When you play the Blue Sun Zenith version, you have to actually... The way it looked for me was that once I kind of comboed off and kind of cast like my second Mind's Desire and had access to most of my deck, I would cast all my copies of High Tide, usually using Solve the Equation for a couple of them. So then I would have 4, maybe 5 High Tides active, depending on Mystic Sanctuary or Flood of Recollection. And then once you do that, it's pretty trivial to Turnabout and Frantic Search yourself up to like 60 mana. Because if you have 4 High Tides active and you need 60 mana, that's only 15 islands. Even if you only have 3 islands in play, that's only 5 untaps, which you can get with Turnabouts and Frantic Searches. I will say you have to be a little bit careful not to deck yourself. You got to keep in mind that if you're trying to produce mana off of Frantic Search specifically, it forces you to draw 2 cards. So if you were to theoretically build up a large enough storm count and then Mind's Desire to exile your entire library, that seems like it'd be a good thing, but you could no longer cast your Frantic Searches. So if you're relying on those for mana, you aren't going to get that mana. Additionally, Blue Sun Zenith is useful prior to the actual combo kill. You can, against control, you can fire off a Blue Sun Zenith on their end step. I never did this, but like, if you're playing a long game and you get 6 islands in play, you can just end step target yourself with Blue Suns for 3, and that forces some interaction out of control, which is a good thing. Additionally, if you have a hand that has like High Tide, Untapper, 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 no payoff, like let's say you can make 16 mana and you have your kill condition in hand. If your kill condition is Brain Freeze, then you have 16 mana and Brain Freeze, and that doesn't actually do anything. If your kill condition is Blue Sun Zenith, and you have 16 mana plus your kill condition, you can target yourself and just draw 7 cards or whatever. I had that come up, I think, 2 to 3 times during the tournament. If I had like mid-teens amount of mana with Blue Suns, I played it pretty conservatively if I could, and I would try to leave 7 mana up after casting my Blue Suns. My idea with that is that I can always solve the equation for Turnabout with 7 mana. I guess you could leave 5 mana up, and then you could solve the equation for Snap. It's worth thinking about. You don't want to spend all your mana on the Blue Suns, obviously. But I think Blue Suns is just straight up better than Brain Freeze, so I would say do that going forward. I will say Brain Freeze gives you an edge in the High Tide mirror, because you can Brain Freeze your High Tide opponent during their combo turn, like with a Frantic Search on the stack. I don't think that's worth thinking about, because I think that all High Tide players are going to move towards Blue Sun Zenith now. I really do suggest that. I will be playing Blue Sun Zenith. I'm not saying this to get you off of Brain Freeze so that I have an advantage in the mirror. I'm saying this because Blue Sun Zenith is straight up better. Additionally, I think that if there are 2 High Tide players and one of them plays Blue Suns and the other one plays Brain Freeze, there's probably not going to be a mirror, because Blue Sun Zenith is better and the Blue Sun Zenith player is going to be higher in the standings. Just saying, it's a better card. So do that going forward. Additionally, I really liked Mystic Sanctuaries in the main board. I got to do tricky stuff involving High Tide on turn 3. So like I think I talked about this in my last video, but it came up again. Turn 4, you cast a High Tide, play Mystic Sanctuary, put High Tide on top. Then like I actually cycled the Cloud of Fairies to get my second copy of High Tide, cast it, and then go off. It just gave me more mana. It was good. It's also nice that you're a little less reliant on Flood of Recollection to get your pieces out of the graveyard. So I really like that. Let's look at sideboard. Defense Grid, I trimmed to 1. I played 2 last time, but I just didn't feel like there were a lot of counterspell decks. I actually think that even without Defense Grids, High Tide is favored against like Blue-White Control or like Thopter Sword. Because it's such a long game that I feel like High Tide can get 7 or 8 lands into play, and then attempt to Turnabout Control down on their end step or their upkeep. I did a lot of upkeep Turnabouts against my Blue-Red opponent. So I don't think defense grid's necessary. I actually so let me tell you guys what I played against. Round one, I played against Riley on Mono Blue Dredge. He beat the crap out of me on Thursday at Monster, and I 2-0'd this time. I got a little bit luckier, and I made some conscious decisions. One thing I did, I swapped my Soul Guide Lanterns for Ravenous Traps, which is weird because I've been talking for a while about how I think Ravenous Trap is out and Soul Guide Lantern is in. The upside to Soul Guide Lantern is that it cycles. It gives you better control over exiling the graveyard. Like against Martyr Proc, you can catch the Kami of False Hope. I would say it's better against like Lingering Souls and Luris decks, probably, the Soul Guide Lantern. The reason I switched to Ravenous Trap, there's a general reason and a specific reason. The general reason is that as High Tide, I'm not scared of a grindy graveyard deck. I'm not scared of Luris, grinding out value. I'm not scared of Lingering Souls. I'm not scared of the Kami of False Hope block. So I don't need that in like the grindy, like fair graveyard matchups. I need Ravenous Trap to not lose to Cephalid Breakfast, Oops All Spells, Reanimator, and Dredge. Like I'm calling those combo graveyard decks because you actually do sometimes need Ravenous Trap on turn 0. Like sometimes you don't get to put a land into play before they attempt to do something unfair. I think that's true of Reanimator with Dark Ritual. It's probably not true of Cephalid Breakfast or Dredge. It is true of some Oops All Spells lists, I think. Additionally, so that's the general reason. Additionally, I did play against Riley on Thursday, and I decided that was a really hard matchup for me, and I knew Riley was going to be in attendance, and I assumed Riley would play Blue Dredge. And specifically, Riley's Blue Dredge sideboard has exactly 3 Spell Pierces in it, and in that case, the way the play patterns work out, if I go to cast a Soul Guide Lantern, Riley can Spell Pierce it, but if I have Ravenous Trap, not only does Riley have to go for his like Tolarian Winds or Breakthrough Dredge turn, which oftentimes involves either tapping out completely or, in the case of Breakthrough, discarding their entire hand. Ravenous Trap is then able to beat Spell Pierce because Spell Pierce is now in the graveyard because it was discarded to Breakthrough. So it did come up, and Ravenous Trap was better for those reasons, so that really helped out. I'm still on Fascination as my alternate win condition. That just makes sense. Energy Fluxes, I was playing Rebuild with the idea that I could cast Solve the Equation for it. I decided that's never realistically going to happen, and Energy Flux is going to be better most of the time against artifact decks. I never sideboarded in my Pieces of the Puzzle. This was mostly for Hymn to Turok decks. The plan for that being to bring in Dig Through Time and Pieces of the Puzzle as cards that I can draw that just get me out of like a Hellbent scenario. Not sure I'd play Pieces of the Puzzle again. It didn't come in, so I'm not sure. So anyway, yeah, round 1 was Riley. And I'll probably go through most of my matchups because I thought it was a fairly interesting tournament, and I actually recall most of my matches, So this is weird. I don't know what it is, but you know how sometimes Magic players like have perfect recall of like their board state and their opponent's board state on like exactly turn 4 of their like game 2, round 4 match that happened yesterday? I don't have that. I don't know why my brain just like deletes it. Sometimes I play a tournament and I get done with the tournament and I don't remember what my round 2 opponent played. I don't know why. It probably has to do with social media rotting my brain or something. But I actually remember a lot of my games from yesterday, so I'm going to talk about them. So game 1 against Riley, I think he was on the play. Turn 3, he made a bunch of power. There might have been a Hogak, I don't remember. There were definitely some zombies and stuff. I think that was the game that I remanded a Cabal Therapy that was flashbacked, which was good for me. So he made a bunch of power on turn 3, and then I untapped and I stormed off and won the game, which was nice. Game 2, Riley mulled to 5, and I kept an opener that had Ravenous Trap, double High Tide maybe, and then I found another early Ravenous Trap, so I was able to stop the initial graveyard pile with one Ravenous Trap, then buy some time, and then cast another Ravenous Trap. And I felt like I was really ahead. And then I went to Storm off, and I think I Mind's Desired for like 7 or 10, and I actually fizzled, which doesn't happen very often. I don't know, I might have made a mistake in that to not maximize my Storm, or I remember bottoming an Impulse off of a Preordain after I was like fizzling because I didn't have the mana to Impulse and then hit like a Turnabout or something, or I guess hit a Frantic Search. So I don't know, it was really weird. I fizzled, so then we were both kind of like drawing dead. Like Riley had no graveyard and I think some Dredgers in hand, and I had like 2 cards left in my hand and they were both pretty irrelevant. So then a Stinkweed Imp got cast, and maybe another Stinkweed Imp, and eventually an Icarid. And Riley was chipping away at me. And then on the last turn before I got lethal, I was able to, with like 6 or 7 lands in play, I was able to double High Tide, Snap, to generate 14 mana, I think. And my last card was Blue Sun Zenith that I top decked. And Riley was at 10 cards in library, and I was able to have them draw 11 and win the game. So it was really lucky for me, but I think it was unlucky for me to not get there on my Mind's Desire, so I think the variance kind of ended up coming to a wash, really. So that was round 1. Round 2, I played against Jen. He was borrowing my... Oh, let me show you guys Blue Dredge really quick. I'll talk about it more after, but this is Blue Dredge. It's Dredge. It uses Breakthrough, Careful Study, and Tolarian Winds. It's got Bridge from Below, and it's got Cabal Therapy. So a lot of the times on turn 1 or 2, usually turn 2, a bunch of dredging will happen, and there will probably be Narcomoebas and Bridge from Belows and Cabal Therapies. So once that happens, the Dredge player will make a bunch of zombies, Cabal Therapy, the combo player, me, and then have like a 2, maybe 3 turn clock post Cabal Therapy. So I think it's kind of difficult. Then there's 3 Spell Pierces in the side. I will say super low starting land count, which I think is part of maybe what ended up making Riley mull to 5. I think it's still correct to play that low of a land count. I just don't know. I don't play very much Dredge at all, but that's the list. Round 2, I played against Jen. He was borrowing my blue-red Tolarian Terror Sailor's Bane list. I think he put in an order for a pretty cool-looking deck, but wasn't able to get it in time, so just borrowed this. I did make sure he had 2 Damping Spheres in his sideboard. That way, if he did play me, he'd have some game. I think Everett thinks that High Tide is favored against blue-red, and I think that lined up with most of the testing that Everett and I did. But I do feel like blue-red can definitely do it. You are a 3 Spell Pierce, 4 Counterspell, 2 Lose Focus deck, and you also have 1 mana threats eventually, and sideboard Sprite Dragon's pretty good. Game 1, I think I was able to Turnabout Jen down and then Storm off. Game 2, I actually had... So Game 2, Jen was on the play. He played a turn 2 Sprite Dragon, which is a good board in. It's just like an additional fast clock for combo. So Jen played turn 2 Sprite Dragon, and I played turn 2 Defense Grid. And then I was under pressure from Sprite Dragon. I cast a High Tide into 5 open mana, knowing that my opponent had Spell Pierce and Counterspell. They went for the Spell Pierce, I think, and I remanded my High Tide, which I don't think was... I don't know. I think I misplayed somewhere in there in the Defense Grid turn, and then I was intending to be alive at 1 life, or I was intending to be alive to Sprite Dragon, but Lightning Bolt was exactly enough to put a counter on Sprite Dragon and then lethal me. So I died with Defense Grid in play, which felt really weird, because this is exactly the matchup where I wanted Defense Grid. And then Game 3, I think Jen had some struggles finding red mana, and ended up with a hand that had like a couple Sailor's Bane and like a Bone Crusher Giant stranded in it for a long time. Because this deck, I will admit, sometimes you end up drawing like a bunch of your creatures, and if you draw your creatures before you draw your Considers and your Thought Scours, then they can kind of get stranded in hand. It's really awkward, and like you can draw the wrong half of your deck, kind of. Whereas traditional Delver, I don't think has that issue. So I think traditional Delver is probably more consistent at the very least than this version. I just really like this version. I just have fun playing it. I'm not sure I would ever bring this to like a large tournament. I I think I would, but it probably wouldn't do as well as traditional Delver. So I ended up winning the match 2-1. I lost, like I said, I lost the game that I had my defense grid, which makes me think that if I could beat this sort of Delver deck without defense grids, then I can probably just cut them from my sideboard. Maybe that's not true, though. Round 3, I played against Justin on Thopter Sword. I think this is a list that Justin and Matt developed kind of in tandem. I believe Justin's version is actually like 3 to 5 cards different from this one. I don't think he submitted his deck list, or I didn't see it. So we're going to look at, this is the version that Matt played. I think they're pretty similar. One caveat that Matt wanted me to bring up is that the deck is... Okay, this deck might have been updated already a little bit. The initial deck, and it's probably because I didn't copy this over immediately, so it probably got adjusted right after the tournament. The original deck had Grand Architect in it, which I think the intent was to let your artifact creatures tap for 1 mana to make Thopter Sword go infinite, kind of the way that Urza plus Thopter combo does in Modern. The issue with that is that Grand Architect also is an anthem for your artifact creatures, which means that your Thopters enter as 2/2s, which means that they don't trigger Sword of the Meek. So it was like kind of a non-bow. So basically it was an error in deck construction that Matt pointed out. So it looks like they've changed it since then, but this is the core concept at least. So game 1... Now actually, I'm just looking at this list now. There's really not that much counter magic. It looks like there's 3 Spell Pierces main. I'm assuming this is the same as the list was yesterday, but it's probably a little different. 3 mainboard Spell Pierces. I didn't know about the Mystical Disputes. That could have been an update. And then as far as sideboard hate, a Void Mirror, a Stone Brain. I don't know if that was in the list yesterday or not. And a Damping Sphere. So game 1, I was playing against Matt, and his turn 2 was Glint Nest Crane. His turn Glint Nest Crane, revealing Sol Ring. His turn 3 was play Sol Ring, and I think tinker it for Inkwell Leviathan that turn, although it may have been the turn after, I don't recall. Anyway, there's a Glint Nest Crane and then an Inkwell Leviathan. And I'll be honest, Inkwell Leviathan is not that fast of a clock. I'm not that scared of 7 damage. That's like, a 3-hit clock. So he made an Inkwell Leviathan, and then I was able to storm off the turn after Inkwell Leviathan came into play. I think I could have waited another turn, but he was tapped low enough, and I didn't want to give an additional draw step, and I forget the exact contents of my hand. It was what I considered a plausibly successful hand. It wasn't like 100%, but I thought that my odds were better then, because I didn't want to give him a chance to find more interaction. So I stormed off game 1. Game 2... game 2, let me talk about my sideboard plan. I didn't know his deck list, but I decided not to bring in Energy Flux. You would think I would bring it in against the Artifact Land Thopter Sword deck, but I decided that I'm not going to lose the game to Thopter Sword. That plan is just too slow for High Tide to care about. If I'm going to lose the game, it's going to be to either Hate Pieces or Inkwell Leviathan. And Energy Flux would slow down my opponent in that case, but it wouldn't actually remove the Hate Piece or the Inkwell Leviathan. So I brought in Defense Grid and 2 Echoing Truths, I think, and I also brought in Fascination because I was a little worried about Gideon's Intervention or another like similar effect, maybe Stonebrain even. Echoing Truth was so that I could bounce Hate Pieces, and it's also not bad against a bunch of Thopters if I have to bide time. So that's how I sideboarded. I think I trimmed a Flood of Recollection, which felt good because I saw Soul Guide Lanterns come in against me. He had to cycle one. I don't like relying on Flood of Recollection in the post game or in post board games. I try to keep them in because one thing that I'm scared of is getting into a game state where I exile Blue Sun Zenith and or Fascination to a Mind's Desire, and then I have to cast them for X=0, which puts them into my graveyard, and then I have to try to flood them back. It scares me to let my only win condition go into the graveyard post sideboard because the opponent could potentially catch it with a piece of graveyard hate. So I don't like being on the Flood of Recollection plan post board. It makes me feel nervous. And I think that's one of the things I need to dial in going forward. Like, did I need to bring in Fascination for this matchup? I don't know, but I just really didn't want to lose the game to Blue Sun Zenith getting sniped by a Gideon's Intervention or a Stone Brain. So I think that's going to be my plan going forward. I think I'm going to typically default to bringing in Fascination in post-sideboard games, unless I'm really comfortable knowing that there's not something to exile my Blue Sun Zenith. I don't know. Maybe it's wrong. Let me know what you guys think about that one. Notably also, if you are playing the deck and you end up in a situation where you have to cast a Mind's Desire, but you are scared of your Blue Sun Zenith, well, I guess Blue Sun Zenith doesn't actually ever hit the graveyard, which is a pretty big upside. It would just shuffle back in even if X is 0. But if you're scared of hitting your Fascination and putting it in the graveyard, you can try to dig to a Remand, and if you cast Fascination off Mind's Desire, X equals 0, you could then remand the Fascination back to your hand. So anyway, game 2, there was an early Ingenious Smith, which actually put on a lot of pressure, and then a Void Mirror came down. I specifically recall I impulsed, and I was looking for an Echoing Truth to answer the Void Mirror, because I thought I was going to have to go through Mind's Desire. But then I ended up drawing Blue Sun Zenith, and I think I was able to... I think this was the game where I was able to High Tide, put High Tide on top using Mystic Sanctuary, cycle Cloud of Fairies, draw second High Tide, cast second High Tide, and then I think I spent most of my hand, and I was looking at having 16... So I was under double High Tide, and my last 2 cards were Blue Sun Zenith and Turnabout, and I think I had the option of either... So my opponent had single blue mana up, and I think 1 card in hand, and I could either tap my islands... I could make 16 mana, right? 4 islands. I could make 12 mana? That sounds right. And I had the option of turnabouting my opponent's single land down and then going to main phase 2, or I could... And then in main phase 2, I would have a small Blue Sun Zenith on myself, and I would hope that I could get there off that. The other option was to not respect, specifically Dispel is what I was scared of, by the way, because I wasn't weak to Spell Pierce, and he didn't have enough mana for Counterspell. What I ended up doing is just floating 12 mana or whatever. Maybe it was 16. I might have been under 3 High Tides. And I turnabouted myself, generated a bunch of mana, then I Blue Sun Zenith myself for 27 cards, drew 27 cards, and won the game. I decided not to respect Dispel because I'd already seen Spell Pierce out of my opponent, and I didn't think that my opponent would play sideboard Dispel and sideboard Spell Pierce. Like, I think if you have 3 Spell Pierces in your sideboard, I don't think you pack Dispels as well. I did think about it, though, because I think it's important to realize that Turnabout can beat some amount of counter magic by moving to main phase 2 after tapping out your opponent. So I got that one. Then I played against Everett in the finals. He was on burn. It was hard. It was really hard. You can see 4 mainboard Pyrostatic Pillars. That was really what the matches came down to. Game 1... he attacked me, and then he played a Pyrostatic Pillar the turn before I was going to go off. I think it was his turn 3 going to my... It was going into my turn 3 or 4. I might have been on the play for this. But he played a Pyrostatic Pillar, and I can't really beat that main board. I was at, 12, I think. So I had 5 spells, and we played my hand face up, and we talked it out together. And even if I cast, 4 High Tides and then all my turnabouts, I couldn't make enough mana because I had 3 lands in play, I think. So I scooped to Pyrostatic Pillar. Game 2, he started Monastery, Swiftspear, and then on turn 2 he cast Double Bolt and attacked with Swiftspear. I snapped the Swiftspear to buy time because he couldn't replay it right then. It was saving me 3 life. My opening hand was, I think... It was Spell Pierce heavy. Because let's talk about how I sideboarded. I brought in Spell Pierces, Echoing Truths, and Dig Through Time. And I think it was overboarding, but I also feel like it was necessary. I brought in 3 Echoing Truths because I have to. I cannot beat Pyrostatic Pillar, and I kind of can't beat Roiling Vortex either. The difference between Pyrostatic Pillar and Roiling Vortex is that Roiling Vortex, I can actually do my Storm turn, and I can cast a Mind's Desire. And if I find an Echoing Truth off of a Mind's Desire, I can cast Echoing Truth, take 5 damage, and bounce the Roiling Vortex. Whereas Pyrostatic Pillar, I have to have the Echoing Truth before I build up my Storm count. So I think it's non-negotiable. I think I need to bring in 3 Echoing Truths. I just have to. And I also brought in 3 Spell Pierce because they can catch the Pyrostatic Pillar before it comes down, which is important because then I can continue to cantrip. And they also catch like Fireblast and burn spells. I think usually a single copy of Spell Pierce buys me a turn. I think. So I think that it kind of like cantrips. If you think about it, if it buys me a turn, then I get another draw step, which also lets me put an additional land into play. And I brought in the Dig Through Time because I thought that if I was bringing in 6 interactive spells, my Storm, like my deck was diluted, so I thought maybe I needed another Delve spell. So anyway, game 2. He put me to like 10 or 11, and I was in a game state where I felt like he was going to kill me next turn. He had 3 cards in hand and 3 lands in play and a Monastery Swiftspear. I was at like 10 or 12, so he was going to untap and have access to 4 cards, 3 mana, and a Swiftspear, and he needed like 3 burn spells to get me, or 2 burn spells if one of them was a Fireblast. So the only way I was winning was if out of 4 cards he had 2 lands in his hand, and he already had 3 lands in play. And I thought it was really unlikely for the burn player to have 5 lands total in that number of cards. So I went for it, and I think I ended up casting a High Tide for 6, and I hit pretty garbage off of it. I didn't hit any pieces of action, and then he won, which is fine. I don't mind losing to Everett. I don't mind losing to Burn. Very happy with a 3-1 finish. I'm thinking I might try to find some space in the sideboard for blue elemental blasts. I think those are cheaper than Hydroblasts, probably. I don't know if I need energy fluxes. I don't know if I need pieces of the puzzle. I don't know if I need defense grid, and I think these could be 2. So honest to God, so I'm probably going to play this in the Win-A-Taiga, so watch out. I'm expecting there to be between 2 and 4 red aggressive decks, and I'm expecting Everett to be in the top 8 as well, unless he plays the High Tide Mirror with Brainstorm and kicks my ass. But honestly, if I think there's going to be that much burn, I could see dedicating as many as 4 sideboard slots to blue elemental blasts, and then just winning that matchup. Because the main reason blue blast is so much better than Echoing Truth or Spell Pierce is because not only does it do the Spell Pierce thing of countering a burn spell for 1 mana, it can also kill a Swiftspear that has like 3 prowess triggers, and it can blow up an onboard red hate piece. So I don't know. If I really do think red is going to be as present as I think it is, I probably should get those in. So I don't know. Anyway, that's my tournament report. High Tide felt great. I'm going to keep playing it. It's really good, so pack your Damping Spheres. Which, by the way, I'm really not that scared of 4 sideboard Damping Spheres. I think I can beat most fair decks that have that, so I don't know. You guys are going to have to figure me out on High Tide because I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I'm going to keep playing it. Anyway, let's move on to the part that you guys actually want to hear about, probably, except for the one High Tide fan out there. That's the other decks. So, Everett... Oh, let me read through the standings really quick. Sorry for the white background. I know you guys hate that. I looked for a little bit to figure out if there was dark mode on here, and then I didn't find it instantly, so then I didn't care. Everett took first. I got second. Chris on mono black third. Matt, that's Matt that works at Mavericks, 4th place. Jen, 5th place, playing my deck, which honestly pretty pleased with Sailor's Bane taking 5th place. I would like to see that deck do well. Riley on 6th with Dredge. Eddie on his Sultai Azimuth food list. And shout out to Eddie and Dave. They actually drove down from Columbus, which is super cool. There was a little bit of a kerfuffle in that they drove to the wrong Mavericks. I probably should have communicated better that there are multiple Mavericks in Cincinnati. I did have the address in the Discord, so I don't feel that bad, but sorry about the mix-up, guys. Thank you for driving down. Justin, also Mavericks affiliated, I think, playing blue-white. Michael played a mono-black deck. Will with Martyr, an unfortunate run. Dave on his Marty Pyromancer list, which I like. Jason on a burn list, which I think I actually got in the Discord, and Belf on mono black plate mail. So going through, this is Everett's burn list. As you can see, it's not easy for High Tide. That's a lot of Pyrostatic Pillars. Roiling Vortex, also pretty good. Fast Clock, he's on 4 Fireblast. Every time we talk about burn, I say, hey, is 4 Fireblast the right number? And he says yes. I think that's probably correct, because you always want to draw 1, and drawing 2 is probably fine a lot of the time. You can get to 4 lands in play. You don't want to see 3 of them, though. Also, notably, I know that Everett beat Will. People talk about Martyr Proc versus Burn a lot, like the life gain deck should automatically beat the Burn deck. I just don't think that's true. Pyrostatic Pillar is really good against Martyr. And additionally, Burn is the only deck that has sideboard hate against life gain. It's got 2 mainboard anti-life gain cards. So people are like really surprised whenever Martyr Proc has a close match against Burn, because I've seen a lot of close matches against Burn, and I think everyone who thinks that Martyr Proc automatically wins just doesn't think about this. This is the only deck that has anti-life gain cards, and there's 4 Vortex and 2 more Vortex that all say can't gain life. Additionally, if the Martyr Proc player's plan is to have a quick Martyr of Sands into Speaker of Heavens and start making Angels, that only works if your opponent doesn't deal damage to you, right? Because usually, I think you have to be at 26 or 27 life for Speaker of the Heavens to work. Usually that's like a Martyr for 2 and then like an attack with Speaker of the Heavens. So if the Martyr Proc player's opponent starts on Goblin Guide and hits them for 2, and then their next turn is Lava Spike Goblin Guide, then the Martyr Proc player doesn't get to make Angels. So I think that Burn is maybe not favored against Martyr Proc, but has tools that, I don't know, I feel like people just don't think about that. It's not as cut and dried as like the life gain deck beats the Burn deck. So anyway, I think this list is insane. It's very scary. Get ready for Burn. I think people are going to play it in the Win-A-Taiga. Second place is me. You saw this list. Third place, Chris. Unfortunately, I think Chris might have updated his list a little bit since last night. I'm pretty sure Chris played 21 Swamps because the Turok's in the main. So I know Chris, his most recent updates were getting rid of Plague Engineers. We just don't think it's a Plague Engineer metagame right now. There's not very many Goblin decks, because there used to be... Riley used to play a lot of Goblins, and I used to threaten to bring Fecundity Goblin Storm sometimes. Additionally, there's been a downtick in Infect, which Plague Engineer is good against because you name Phyrexian. And then the only other things Plague Engineer is really good for is Elves, which we haven't seen in a while. It's got marginal value against Thopter Sword, but I also don't think that's really what the game is about. And it's good against... Oh. Sorry, I just had an alarm go off. I've got some miscuts on eBay that I need to bet on in the next 10 minutes. Anyway, it's not a Plague Engineer meta anymore, so Chris is on Graveyard Trespasser and Lily the Last Hope. He said Graveyard Trespasser felt amazing. He was really happy with it, I think. So that's good. He said the 21st land felt terrible, and he flooded a couple times, so he's back on 20, it looks like. And I think... Oh, so you know what it is? He actually swapped the 21st land to a Cling to Dust main, because it cantrips, so... Anyway, this deck is still good. Fourth place, this is the Thopter Sword list that Matt played. I like Ingenious Smith a lot. Tinker's cool because it gets Inkwell Leviathan or it gets your Thopter Sword. I feel like Doug is going to show up and ask why there are no Thirst for Discoveries. Is that the one where you discard an artifact? Doug loves Thirst for Discovery. Yeah, this list seems fine. I don't have strong opinions on it. It seems good, probably. I don't know. This is a blue-red Sailor's Bane deck. I think it's fine. Like I said, I put this list together. I think it's fine. I don't know if I'd play it in a big tournament, but I think it's fine and fun. It's one of the things I was talking about, like, why play this deck instead of playing Delver of Secrets? And I think it was Chris that described, he used this equivalency. He said it's like Legacy. In Legacy, there's Delver, and there's also Death Shadow, sort of. And the difference between Delver and Death Shadow, I think, is that Delver wants to play a threat on turn 1 and then hold up interaction. Whereas Death Shadow wants to interact or like cantrip on turn 1 and maybe 2, and then play like a 7/7 and hold up interaction. So this deck is less like Delver and more like Death Shadow, because none of my threats are coming out on turn 1, and usually not turn 2 either. The first couple turns are going to be spent holding up Spell Pierce and maybe Counterspell or Lose Focus, and casting Consider, Thought Scour, and Frantic Inventory to juice up your graveyard. And then typically when I play this deck, I want to be playing like a 1-mana Tolarian Terror and holding up a Counterspell or like a Lightning Bolt or something. So that's kind of the difference. I think this deck is better against attacking strategies than Delver is. Like it's... we don't see much of it, but it's good against Hollow One Vengevine. Like, this deck is just better at blocking. I also suspect this deck might be better against control decks, because I think you have more card advantage in like the Frantic Inventories. You have a Planeswalker, and your threats are really hard to Swords to Plowshares. Maybe that's not true because of days and things, but that's my thought process. If you're a blue-red player, I'm not sure I would say this deck is better than Delver, but it is... I think this deck is capable of top 8ing a weekly event at Monster Games. So, this is Blue Dredge. We looked at it a bit earlier. I think this list is pretty insane, if I'm being honest. It looks very consistent and very scary. The biggest difference between this and normal Red Dredge is I think you just see a lot more cards with the Breakthrough Tolarian Winds package. This is Eddie's Sultai Asmofood list. The mana base is, I don't know if I would say greedy, but you have to play some tap lands and some Ash Barrens. This list is kind of what you'd expect from an Asmo Cat Oven pile. It's got Trail of Crumbs. I will say... one of the cool things about this list, and sorry for giving up your secret technology, Eddie, there is a combo in it. If you have Lonus in play, plus Academy Manufactor, plus Woe Strider, plus a Cauldron Familiar in the graveyard, which is a lot, but I mean, this deck can assemble that. I believe that's the full combo, because you would either play the Cauldron Familiar or have a food in play. When you play the Cauldron Familiar, it triggers Lonus, which makes you investigate, so you make a clue token. But because of Academy Manufactor, you get a clue, a food, and a treasure. So then you sacrifice the cat to the Woe Strider, and then you use the food that you produced from the Academy Manufactor to get back the cat. And that gives you infinite drain. So, pretty cool to have an infinite combo. Thopter Sword, this is Justin's placement. Same deal. This was mono black. I think Michael played this. I didn't get to see many of his games. I think Gatekeeper of Malakir is good. We have Abyssal Persecutor. Custodial Lich is cool. 3 Cabal Therapy. I'm not sure how good Cabal Therapy is in this deck, because I don't really want to sacrifice any of these creatures. It's probably fine. Innocent Blood. Also not sure if I like that as a removal spell. Maybe Defile instead, because I don't think we want to be sacrificing our creatures. What do I know? 3 Hymns. What is Sudden Death? That's cool. I like that it's uncounterable. Quest for the Gravelord. Very interesting. It's a 1-mana 5/5 sort of. Fairy Macabre's uncounterable graveyard hate, but that is a lot of money spent on it. A lot of money on extirpates, and it looks like we have some money left over. This is an interesting list. I think there's some good ideas here. Martyr proc, I don't think much changed. It looks like... Okay, so we talked about this. Will is switched to 2 Relic Vials instead of Relic Vial plus Chalice of Life and Death. And it looks like he was respecting High Tide with Damping Sphere, Blossoming Calm. Blossoming Calm can be difficult. That can be difficult for High Tide. And that's one of the places where Brain Freeze is, I think, better than Blue Sun Zenith, because it's easier to set up a lethal Brain Freeze with Remand on your own Brain Freeze in response to Blossoming Calm, whereas it's kind of hard to do that if you're on the Blue Sun Zenith plan. But Next, this is Dave's. Oh, there's a Manamorphous. This is Dave's Marty Pyromancer. I think it's super cool. We have been discussing maybe switching it to just black-red Pyromancer, trimming white. I know that Dave was finding the Magmatic Channelers to be really good, and I thought he played Bedlam Reveler, but I guess he's off of that. He's on Luris now. So I think Dave's going to try and work this towards black-red only, which I think is going to be really good. And then this is Belf's Mono Blacklist. It's kind of built around Haunted Plate Mail, which is a really strong card. It's a 4-mana 4/4, essentially, that synergizes really well with his board wipes in the main. Then there's a bunch of good removal, a lot of power in the mana base, and card draw from Underworld connections. Lashwrath also plays really well with Haunted Plate Mail and board wipes, so pretty cool deck. I'm kind of shortchanging those last two deck techs because it's been a long video, so I think I'm going to hit stop recording and get this uploaded. But thanks for tuning in, guys. Just wanted to say again, shout out to Mavericks for letting us get into your store and do some events there. Ian and Matt have both been really great. Looking forward to more of that. Additionally, while I'm shouting out stores in the area, not related to Budget Vintage, but if you haven't been to Alchemist's Refuge yet, that's Medina's shop, you should absolutely go. My buddy Corey's been going there a lot lately on Fridays and Saturdays, and I actually went yesterday after the budget tournament. I figured after a long tournament, I should go to another store and relax by playing some Magic. So I went and I played some EDH, but there's something special about that store. It's a pretty small place, but Medina's using the space really, really well, and they actually just expanded into a couple additional rooms. There were like 20 or 24 people there playing EDH, and I gotta say, it is the friendliest, coolest community I've ever been to. There's something about Medina. He's got this ability to create wonderful communities. Everyone was very nice. The games were awesome. I know that people end up staying there playing EDH until like 2 and 4 in the morning all the time. There's like people like order pizza. Like Medina will order pizza and just like offer a slice to anybody who wants it, or like order cookies for everyone. It's hands down the cleanest, nicest bathroom I've been to at any LGS in Cincinnati, or maybe ever. Which other LGSs, I love you, but clean your bathrooms more and have paper towels. Like, come on. But I just think Medina makes such a welcoming community. I know there's some CEDH there, there's some budget CEDH, and then there's a lot of, I think, typically lower power EDH, but I'm pretty sure people will play whatever. The stock is also really good. It's really well organized, and everything is like entered into their system, so Medina actually knows what he has. So just shout out to that store. It might be the nicest, and like we were talking about it, it's kind of tight quarters, like physically, but it actually is really nice. It contributes to this feeling that like you really are in like a community, and everyone wants to talk and be nice. It's like it's seriously awesome. So you should go to Medina's. That's Alchemist Refuge. It's over in it's on Montgomery Road, Mason Road, something like that. It's up by like the Fields Erdel exit. So anyway, shout out to that shop and shout out to John. Really awesome place. I'm going to get this video uploaded today, hopefully by like 6 p.m., depending on how YouTube uploading goes. So don't forget, Monday, March 13th, we have an online tournament, and then March 25th at 1 p.m., we have our Win-A-Taiga at Mavericks. That's no proxy, 1 p.m. start time. There should be a deck submission link post, or a sign-up like deck submission thing in Discord shortly, and that's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. This has been Rusty with Budget Vintage.